Okay, so I wanted to work through a few of these problems for practice, but before I do that, I wanted to just reiterate something we talked about, or something I talked about last time that we got together, was just looking at the labels and solving. And then I created some questions that are similar to what you might potentially see on your test coming up here for 110. And what you're going to see here is things like, it'll tell you to calculate the dosage. It'll give you an order. It'll give you what's available. And sometimes it'll show you a picture of a label. And then it'll say how much to administer. Now, the thing you don't know is, or the thing you need to keep in mind is, when you answer this question, you need to make sure that you're indicating what the medication is being delivered in. So if we're talking about tablets, then it's going to be tablets. If it's capsules, it's going to be capsules. If it's a suspension, then it's going to be in milliliters. If it's an injectable, it's going to be in milliliters. So really you have three options: tablets, capsules, milliliters. Okay. There might be other variations, and we'll cover those if they come up, but those are the three main ones that you're going to be solving for. So don't forget to put in and indicate what your value is, what your unit is. And like I said, it's usually going to be tablets, capsules, or milliliters. So I want to go through questions 10, 11, 12, and 13 first for the practice, for practice purposes. As a reminder, one of the things I highly recommend you do is just do a simple Google search for medication labels or drug labels, and just look at them, get familiar with them, because they all look a little bit different, but they, at least from what I understand, by law, have to have certain things that are important for you as a nurse to get from. You need to know what the name of the medication is, its brand and generic name are typically listed, the strength, and then the quantity. When next time we get together, I'll show you suspension questions, and it'll be like something that's milligrams per milliliter, or grams per milliliter, or micrograms per milliliter. And that will also be clearly indicated on the label. So for this Xanax, what's available, the strength is this 0.25 milligrams, so 0.25 milligrams. Sometimes you'll see it this, and sometimes you'll see a parentheses and it'll say like 250 micrograms because they're equivalents. You would just use whatever the order says to use, essentially. So if the order is in milligrams, you'd use milligrams on the label. If the order were in micrograms and micrograms were listed on the label, you would use the micrograms. You can also convert milligrams to micrograms or micrograms to milligrams if you needed to, but you don't need to, at least not for this. Now, looking at the order, first of all, it's helpful to know that the order and the label match. I will say that I've seen on tests where there's a mismatch, and some of that is just accidental. So don't get too worried about that if that ends up being the case. And then so they should match up. Then the next thing is the number for the order, so 0.75 milligrams. And then it'll tell you how it's administered. So PO means per oral or by mouth, and BID means twice a day. Now, sometimes you might get, and this might be more like an ATI type question, or maybe it'll be more of a question down the road, or even on just a like a non-drug calc test. It'll say like, what does BID, TID, QID, what does that indicate? Or how many times a day would you administer the medication? Or how much would you give, in an entire day? Or how much would you need if for a 7 days worth of medication? These are some things that you might see and you might address for these types of questions, but on the dosage calc test, they're usually just focusing on, can you do the math? And then it even tells you down here in the question, how much medication will the patient receive in one dose? You'll notice that it just says how much medication, doesn't say how many tablets, doesn't say how many milliliters. you need to know how to do that. And then, like I said, I'm going to show you how to do that. And as we go through, and the big clue is look at the label. The label will tell you it's in tablets. So you're not going to mistakenly put milliliters unless you're not looking at the label for some reason. So you can solve this. And for today, I'll do for these types of medications, I'll do what's called the order over have or the order over available methodology. So what that means is you take what you have as your order. So I'm just going to abbreviate that O. So here's order over the available. So over A. And then you're going to multiply that by your quantity. Now, quantity usually just means what are your units. So this is tablets. So your quantity for this one is tablets. If we had a suspension, your quantity would be in milliliters. When it's tablets, it's 1. I've yet to see where it says, 2 tablets. It's 0.25 milligrams per tablet. Okay. So quantity would be 1 tablet. Sometimes you'll see 1 milliliter. Sometimes you'll see 5 milliliters. Sometimes you'll see 15 milliliters. There can be a variation of the quantity when it comes to suspensions. And when we talk about that next time, you'll see some examples of that. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over to my paper here. And so we're going to look at our order, which was 0.75 milligrams. Then we have our available, which was 0.25 milligrams. And then our quantity was 1 tablet. So following what's called the ordered over have or the ordered over available, 0.75 milligrams over 0.25 milligrams times your 1 tablet. And I'm just going to abbreviate that tab. And you have an answer of 3 tablets. So on your test, in the answer key, you would write 3 tablets. If you were going to do this question following dimensional analysis, I would set it up like this. I would start off with my order. Then I would, my conversion factor would be, we want to get rid of milligrams and we want tablets. And we know that 1 tablet is 0.25 milligrams. And I'll get the same answer. I show this 2 ways, not because you need to show it 2 ways. It's just sometimes I have students who are adamant that they do order over have. And for the most part, that works great for 110, 120. But when you get into 110, 130, but when you get into 220, 230, and 240, then though this doesn't always work. This with all the different types of things that you might be doing later on, particularly dealing with flow rate type questions. This works every time for just about every single question. It just takes a little bit of practice for doing it, which is why I've introduced it to you. That way you can see it and get introduced to it early and often. All right. So let me go back to my question or the questions here, and let's look at the next one. The next one says you have cephalexin, 500 milligrams, POBID. So 500 milligrams of cephalexin, an antibiotic, PO by mouth, BID twice a day. It tells you it's available 250 milligrams and that there are 100 capsules. We now know that when we do this, that it's the 250 milligrams isn't 100 capsules. 100 capsules is just the big label. If you go to the pharmacy, these are the labels that they see, and then they dispense from that. So like if this were a 10-day supply, they're going to put 20 capsules into a bottle, like one of those orange bottles, to send home with the patient. Okay. So if you've ever been on an antibiotic, you've experienced this thing. But if you were buying like a bottle of Tylenol, you know, whatever its strength is, you're not taking the whole bottle to get to that strength, right? You're taking 1 or 2 tablets, capsules, caplets, whatever, however it's administered. You're taking 2 to get to that dose, depending on what it tells you to take. Take 1, take 2, you know, don't exceed 8 in a day, that sort of thing. So when you see these labels, don't get hung up on the quantity. That just tells you how much is in the big bottle that's in the pharmacy. You usually don't have access to that unless you're working maybe in a nursing home, or you're working in a facility where you have access to some of the non-locked up medications for administering quickly to patients, whatever you're allowed to do by law. So 250 milligrams per capsule. So what is my order? My order is 500 milligrams. What do I have available? 250 milligrams. And what's my quantity? 1 capsule. So let's write it out. So I'm going to follow the same strategy I did up here. My order is 500 milligrams. My available is 250 milligrams. And my quantity, I'm just going to write Q, is going to be 1 capsule. So following the order over available or order over have format, I have 500 milligrams that's ordered. Available is 250 milligrams. And my quantity is the 1 capsule. I'm just going to abbreviate that CAP. And if you already did this in your head and you got 2 capsules, you're doing that right. Just remember that they're going to ask you to show your work. So you need to write something down. And sometimes even for these straightforward questions, you might be struggling. Well, what do I write down? You could write down what I'm writing. They want to make sure that you know how to set these things up and do them. And I guess they also want to make sure you're not cheating when you take the test. And then for dimensional analysis purposes, I'm going to set it up exactly the same way. What's my conversion factor? Well, I don't want milligrams. I do want capsules. So I know that that's supposed to be 1 capsule, 250 milligrams, and I get the same answer, 2 capsules. All right, let's go to the next one. Lanoxin, which is, and then the generic is digoxin, but Lanoxin, it says the order is 0.75 milligrams. You have in the entire bottle 30 tablets. It doesn't say PO or BID or anything like that, but by process of elimination and just rationalization, we can look at it and say, okay, it's tablets. It doesn't say anything about suppositories. It's not an injectable. So we're going to assume that we're swallowing these. Now, something you should know about tablets. Tablets can be scored and they can be cut in half. That differentiates from things like capsules. Capsules, if you've ever seen those and if you were to open them up, they would basically have little beads in them of medication, and you can't divide that in half, at least not exactly in half. Plus you might spill some of the active ingredients. And so a tablet usually sometimes or oftentimes they can be scored and then you can cut them in half. And so you could give a half tablet, but you cannot give a half capsule. Okay. Usually you're when you're doing these, you usually don't have to worry about like rounding of capsules and rounding of tablets. But if you ever get to a situation where it says administer, 2.5 capsules, you're probably going to give them 3 capsules. You want to double check and clarify that with your instructor, but you're not going to be giving them, you can't give them a half a capsule. But if it's a tablet, you could give them 2.5 tablets. Okay. So Lanoxin 0.75 milligrams is the order, and here's what I have available. Notice this says 250 micrograms. That's what that symbol is there, that little, what looks like a UG. And then in parentheses, it says 0.25 milligrams. And the reason they have these both here is because it's common for this medication, most likely it's common for this medication to be ordered in either milligrams or micrograms. And so they're going to give you both options, or you might see both. So this question could have been also written out as, the order is Lanoxin 750 micrograms, but it said 0.75 milligrams. So since it tells us milligrams, we're going to use the milligrams on the label to solve this. So again, just following my order is the 0.75 milligrams. I know it seems like I have a thing for 0.75 milligrams here for some reason. Then what I have available is the same thing as up here, 0.25 milligrams. Quantity is 1 tablet. And then I'm just going to go ahead and point you to this because it's the exact same setup with the exact same answer. So even though it's a different medication, same answer. That was not necessarily intentional. It's just how it went out. Sometimes when I give you practice problems, I also try and keep it realistic. So I wouldn't want you to be calculating and be like, okay, I got to give this person 12 capsules. That probably doesn't seem right. All right. The last question on here for the calculating tablets is this one right here. So you'll notice that there is no label. It just tells you what it is. It just tells you what's available. So the order is volume 2.5 milligrams. We have available 5 milligrams, and we want to know how much to administer. So if it's 2.5 milligrams, we know that 2.5 milligrams is half of 5. So you're going to give this person 1/2 tablet. And so I'm going to show you how that might be presented. But also remember, because we talked about tablets can be scored. And a lot of times if they are scored, that means you can give them half tablet, or you can use a pill cutter and you can cut it in half. So that way you can administer half a tablet. I will say that if something can't be cut in half, then the order would account for that. So you're not going to see orders telling you to cut something in half that can't be cut in half. And we probably all know somebody who has a parent or grandparent that cuts their medications in half, and they're they're doing that on their own, and they haven't talked with their physician. There's a chance that that's safe and okay, and there's a chance that that means they're not getting the effective dose that they're supposed to be taking. So anytime I hear somebody say that, I tell them you need to talk with your doctor about whether or not that's okay to do. So anyways, so I'm just going to write that over here in this last little square of this piece of paper. What's my order? 2.5 milligrams. What do I have available? 5 milligrams. And then my quantity is what? 1 tablet. So I always like to rewrite when I'm doing math with this stuff. I write it in the decimal form. So 2.5 milligrams is also 2.5 milligrams. And so following the order over available, 2.5 milligrams over 5 milligrams times the 1 tablet. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take in my calculator, I'm going to do 2.5 divided by 5, and I'm going to get an answer of 0.5 tablets. I'm just going to write tab. 0.5 tablets. Now, sometimes, and this is something you'll need to verify with your instructor, sometimes they want you to write that like this. Half tab. So they might want you to write the fractional portion of that. You will need to ask your instructor how they want you to represent if you're giving somebody a half a tablet. So do they want the decimal? Do they want the fraction? Or does it not matter? If it does not matter, then you get to choose how you want to do that. I will say that I've heard different scenarios, which is why I'm telling you to verify it with your instructor. That way, I don't tell you wrong information. Okay, so that was pretty much it for the tablets and the new stuff. I did want to go over some of the review some of the things that we have done already. And I'm just going to do a few of these. But like I said, I gave these to you as practice so you can do them on your own. So I'm going to focus more on, since this was asked before we started, just some of these household metric conversions and then where to put the decimal and things like that. I also want to, actually, I'm going to go ahead and address number 1 and number 2, because I think it's important to see what to do with these. Because keep in mind, when we are doing like metric to metric or household to household, you do not round those numbers. You like when you see a question that looks like this, where it's pretty straightforward, just kind of like here, go from milligrams to grams, micrograms to milligrams. Don't round those. Leave them as whatever the number is. So like here, you're going to get an answer of 1.375. That is your answer. Do not round that to 1.4. Leave it at 1.375. When you get down here, though, when you go from pounds to kilograms, household measurements to metric measurements, or household units to metric units, then yes, you would round to the nearest tenth, because otherwise you're going to have some really long number of repeating numbers. And we're going to address that in just a second. I added a quart question. I don't know if you'll see quarts on your test, but I thought I'd add that on there just to as something additional. So I'm just going to write these out so I have them ready to go. And then
I have a question for number 5 and 7 when you get to it.
Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll put them on to where I'll do 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7. And then I won't work it through. I'll answer your question before we get to it, but I'll just, those are the ones that I'm going to work through. And then that way I'll give you a little bit of some practice. Okay. All right, so before we get to 5 and 7, there's a couple things here. So you can answer this question a variety of ways. If you already know, based off of your base rules of 10, you know that the difference between milligrams and grams is 3 zeros or three bases of 10. And you can move your decimal place over 1, 2, 3, and you get an answer of 1.375 milligrams. If you do not feel comfortable doing it that way, I recommend that you do dimensional analysis until you do feel comfortable doing it that way. And the reason I mention dimensional analysis, because you have to know what these conversions are. They won't be given to you on the exam. You need to know that you can convert milligrams to grams and that 1 gram is equivalent to 1,000 milligrams. When you write it out using dimensional analysis, you'll know to divide by 1,000 as opposed to multiplying by 1,000. And I'll just say this, everyone does it. It's a common mistake. Not everyone just starts off looking at this, especially when this is not something you do on a regular basis, and says, oh, I'm going to move it over 3 to the left or 3 to the right. You don't, unless you're practicing this on the regular, which I know that you are now a little bit, but that's where common mistakes occur. So this would equal 1.375 grams. That is your answer. Do not round. Okay, do not round. And then again, if you're just moving your decimal point, okay, you can move it 3 to the left. And that's how you would get to the 1.375 by moving the decimal. You just need to know, do you move it to the left or move it to the right? I will say that usually you're not going to make some big, gigantic number when you're doing these conversions. So that sometimes is a clue for you. For this one, I'm going to do the same thing. Micrograms is a smaller unit than milligrams. And so I can move 3 to the left and get 0.225, or I can write this out using dimensional analysis. And 1 milligram is equal to 1,000 micrograms. And you get the same answer, the 0.225 milligrams. And like I said up here, that's your answer. And just like it is here, this is your answer. Do not round that answer. 0.225 milligrams is your answer when you're doing just basic conversion type questions. Okay. Now let me show you a situation where you might round. When you go from pounds to kilograms. The easiest thing to keep in mind when you're going from pounds to kilograms is just to divide by 2.2. Okay. That's what that is. If you were going from kilograms to pounds, you would multiply by 2.2. But from the standpoint of like nursing and other, healthcare related fields, you're going to convert the patient's weight from pounds to kilograms. You're usually not going to go in the reverse. Okay. So if I was doing this dimensional analysis wise, you don't have to do it this way. I actually don't even do it this way because I just know to divide by 2.2, but sometimes it's helpful just to see it. So what is 117 divided by 2.2? Let me put that on my calculator. So what I get is 53.18181818. It just keeps repeating. So I'm going to represent that as 1818, and that it just keeps repeating. So you don't want to have a number that just keeps repeating over and over and again. So what you're going to do is you're going to round that number to 53.2 kilograms. You're going to round that number to the nearest tenth because you're making the conversion from pounds to kilograms. You're going from household units to the metric units. And that's that's kind of the rounding rule associated with that. So again, up here, do not round because we're going metric to metric. Do not round because we're going to metric to metric. Do round because you're going from household to metric. And the other clue is your instructors don't want you writing 53.1818181818. When are you going to stop? You don't need to do that. All right. So before I do number 5, what was your question?
On the conversion sheet that you gave us, it's really hard to see what this number is. I think it's 480.
Oh,
I don't know. And then the cup, I think that says 240.
yes. So here, let me write those down. So these are the conversions that you need to know. So 1 cup equals 240 milliliters. 1 pint equals 2 cups, which equals 480 milliliters. And then 1 quart equals 2 pints, which equals 4 cups, which equals whatever that, I think that's 960, 480 times 2. Yeah, 960 milliliters. So like, and sometimes it's helpful. Yeah, we can see. So this is actually a 32-ounce water bottle that I'm displaying, and you can see that the 1,000 milliliters is right there. So you can see sometimes how this correlates, you know. So 32 ounces is a quart, okay, and then 16 ounces is a pint. So you can see that a pint is actually less than 500 milliliters to 480. And then if we went all the way down to the 250 ml, and then the 8 ounces, which is a cup, is 240 ml. So a lot of times, like when I'm trying to figure out all this conversion stuff, I just look at the things I use on a regular basis when I'm cooking, teaspoons and tablespoons and cups. A lot of times they mention both the milliliters and the ounces, or the milliliters, ounces, and cups, or pints or quarts. It's not always that way. And if you've ever followed recipes, you know that you're constantly trying to figure out how to measure out the different things. Maybe it's just me. But does it, hopefully this helps. Now you can see, and then if I don't add it to the practice sheet that I created, or the practice problems that I created for you, just email me and remind me. I'll make sure to add that. But this is the 3 common ones: the cup, the pint, and the quart. I don't even know if you'll have quart, but I put it on there just in case.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does that make it easy, or make it?
Yeah, it's
does that
just
answer your
like
question? Okay.
on the conversion sheet, it's like it's like black. I don't know. It's like like there's an error, and then I guess someone tried to write on top of it, so I just couldn't see what that number.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and do these problems here. So 1.5 pints. And so since we know what 1 pint is in milliliters, we don't need to go through the cups and all that kind of stuff. It's just something to keep in mind. Again, I'm going to do dimensional analysis for this. So I know that 1 pint is 480 milliliters. So I'm going to take 1.5 times 480, and I'm going to get 720 milliliters. And then for my cups to milliliters, remember, I mean, you can certainly leave it as 1/2, but if you're putting it into your calculator, it probably makes a lot more sense to do this, to make it 0.5. I'm sorry, not milliliters, sorry, cups. And then we know that 1 cup is 240 milliliters. So 1 cup, what we're trying to get rid of, 240 milliliters. And then that would be 120 milliliters as the answer. Now, as far as the question you had earlier about like your decimal and stuff, particularly with like whether we're talking about teaspoons, tablespoons, or even kilograms, you want to make, like, if you're just doing a basic like conversion and it's gonna and the number I mean, if you're going from teaspoons to tablespoons or cups to teaspoons or tablespoons, which I don't think that you will be doing, you probably aren't doing rounding in that case. But if for some reason you were going from, usually it's when you go from milliliters to teaspoons or milliliters to tablespoons. So let me give you a scenario and let me see if I can come up with one where you might get a fraction, or I mean a decimal answer. So let's say I wanted to know, you had 12 milliliters and I wanted to know how many teaspoons that was. So we know that 1 teaspoon is 5 milliliters. If you didn't, now you do. So I'm going to take my 12 milliliters. I'm going to multiply by my conversion factor, where 1 teaspoon is 5 milliliters. So 12 divided by 5 will give me an answer of 2.4 teaspoons. Now you might be thinking, well, I can't give somebody 2.4 teaspoons. How could I do that? Well, you can if you have a syringe that is measured in teaspoons. You can certainly give somebody 2.4 teaspoons. It just depends on what you have available. If you're just doing a basic conversion, you can't make any assumptions on how you would administer it. And so you would leave that as is. If this were like 2.45, 45, it just kept repeating, then you would just round to the nearest 10th. Go ahead.
So the question that I missed on my dosage calc, it was 2.5 tablespoons to milliliters. And the answer was 37.5, but instead I put 3.75.
Okay. So let me show you, and hopefully this will help. And again, sometimes it's just practicing with this, and then you get, like, when you're going through this and you get a little bit antsy. So first of all, what is the conversion? 1 tablespoon is how many milliliters?
15.
Good. So that's another thing to just keep in mind. If you're giving somebody 2.5 tablespoons, does it make sense that the answer would be 3.75 if 1 tablespoon is 15?
No, I don't know what I did.
Okay.
Like, I don't know. Maybe it was just nervous.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, is in my opinion. But so this is how you would do this. Do you do dimensional analysis or do you not?
I don't.
Okay, that's okay. So if you're doing this, just multiply by 15 and then make sure you're plugging it into your calculator correctly, right? So 2.5, this is helpful for everybody. So this is not like to call you out or anything like that. Times 15, and you can see the 37.5. And then as a check, you know already, and hopefully, you know, you're sitting there thinking like, okay, well, I know that 1 tablespoon is 15 milliliters. So if you start writing down or you look at it, it says 3.75, like that doesn't seem right, because 1 is 15. So it's got to be more than 15. It's got to be at least 30 because there's 2 of them. So that can be another check that you have, and then just practice and make sure that you're putting it into your calculator. You guys get to use calculators, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So just make sure, like, so if you're doing these in your head or you're writing it out and you're calculating it, it's okay to also put it into your calculator just to make sure that you're getting the right answer. And that way that'll help to eliminate the decimal issues. So, and thank you for clarifying what the concern was, because again, that's helpful for me. And I'm trying to figure out, like, well, where did you go wrong? And to me, it just sounds like you got anxious, anxiety took
Yeah.
over, and you maybe you probably did 2.5 times 1.5, and that's what you put into your calculator, because that will give
Yeah.
you 3.75. So, are there any other questions for Boyce, or? All right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop for today. And then, like I said, I'll be back with you guys on Tuesday. And my plan is to go through and talk about suspensions. In the meantime, you can practice these problems. Like I said, I just posted them today in the Microsoft OneDrive folder, so you have access to them. It's made specifically for Boyce, particularly this question here, and then these cups and quarts and pints, because they don't typically do cups, quarts, pints, or the fluid intake question like this on the Allegheny version, but everyone's has questions that are similar to these 10 through 13. So just practice them. I will be adding more questions to them, and like I said, we'll go through and review suspension type questions, and then I'll try and get some more of these types of questions put together. And also, you can go into the Allegheny campus. There's some practice tests in there as well, and there's some more questions like these, like the basic conversion type questions, and then you can get some additional practice with those as well.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. I'll talk with you guys next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Yep, bye. You're welcome.